The N-word, a term so loaded with historical pain that its mere mention can spark heated debates. Today, we're diving into why this word is considered haram or forbidden in Islam, and what that means for our broader society.
Wow, that's certainly a heavy topic to tackle. What prompted this discussion?
Well, it's a conversation that's long overdue. You see, the use of the N-word has been causing quite a stir in our community and beyond. It's not just about religious doctrine. This issue touches on language, history, and respect in ways that affect everyone, regardless of faith or background.
I can see why it's such a complex issue. So, what makes this word so problematic from an Islamic perspective?
Well, it's rooted in the Islamic principle of human dignity. You see, Islam places a huge emphasis on respecting all people, regardless of race or ethnicity. The N-word, with its history of slavery and racial segregation, goes directly against this teaching. It's not just another curse word. It carries centuries of pain and dehumanization.
That's a powerful point. But I've heard some people argue that it's just a word, and that everyone's too sensitive these days. How would you respond to that?
You know, that's a common argument, but it's pretty short-sighted. Words have power. They shape our thoughts, attitudes, and society. Dismissing the impact of such a loaded term shows a lack of understanding and empathy. And let's not forget, language evolves. What might have been acceptable in the past doesn't mean it's okay now.
So it's about progress and respect. But what about context? Some claim that using the word doesn't make someone racist if it's used in certain situations, like in music or among friends.
The context argument. It's tricky, right? But here's the thing. When it comes to the N-word, Islamic teachings are pretty clear. The harm it causes outweighs any perceived benefit or intention. It's not about the individual's intent, but about the broader impact. Using this word, regardless of context, perpetuates a culture of disrespect and racial insensitivity.
That makes sense. It reminds me of a hadith you mentioned earlier. Could you share that again?
Of course. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab. A white person has no superiority over a black person, nor does a black person have any superiority over a white person except by piety and good action." This hadith really underscores the Islamic principle of equality and the importance of judging people by their character and actions, not their race or ethnicity.
That's a powerful statement. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, it's not just about following rules. It's about embodying the spirit of respect and equality that Islam promotes. Now, I know some people might be thinking, but everyone says it. It's in music, movies, even some comedians use it. What would you say to that?
Well, just because something is common doesn't make it right. As Muslims, or just as decent human beings, we're called to a higher standard. We should be setting an example, not following harmful trends.
Exactly. And let's talk about the "it's just a joke" defense. Some people argue that using the word in a humorous context somehow makes it okay. But that's a weak argument, in my opinion. Humor at the expense of others, especially when it involves racial slurs, is not harmless. It normalizes disrespect and can perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
You're right. And from an Islamic perspective, we're taught to be mindful of our words. There's a belief that angels record our deeds, including what we say. So even if someone thinks they're just joking around, those words still have consequences.
That's a great point. It's about accountability, both in this life and the next. Our words matter, and we should choose them carefully. Now, I know changing habits can be difficult. For those who might be used to using this word, what advice would you give them to break the habit?
Well, first, I'd say it's great that they're willing to change. Recognizing the need to do better is the first step. After that, it's about being mindful and catching yourself. If you slip up, acknowledge it, apologize, and keep trying to do better.
Solid advice. It's a process, and it takes time and effort, but it's worth it to create a more respectful and inclusive environment for everyone. And it's not just about avoiding one word, it's about cultivating a mindset of respect and equality in all our interactions.
You're absolutely right. This conversation goes beyond just the use of a single word. It's about how we treat each other, how we view race and ethnicity, and how we can build a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. And while we've been discussing this from an Islamic perspective, these principles of respect, dignity, and equality are universal. They're values that people of all faiths and backgrounds can and should embrace. It's about being a good human being, regardless of your religious beliefs or lack thereof.
That's so true. And it's interesting how this conversation touches on the broader issue of language and its impact on society. The words we use shape our reality in so many ways. It's not just about slurs, it's about how we talk about race, gender, and other aspects of identity.
Absolutely. Language is powerful. It can uplift and empower, or it can demean and marginalize. As a society, we need to be more conscious of the words we choose and their potential impact. And it's not just about policing language, it's about fostering understanding and empathy. When we truly understand why certain words are harmful, we're more likely to make better choices in our speech.
That's a great point. Education and awareness are key. It's not enough to just tell people not to use certain words. We need to have these deeper conversations about history, impact, and respect.
Exactly, and that's why discussions like this are so important. By talking openly about these issues, we can promote understanding and encourage positive change. You know, it's interesting to note that this conversation isn't just happening in religious circles. It's a topic that's being discussed in schools, workplaces, and social settings across the country.
You're right about that. It's become a part of a larger dialogue about inclusivity and respect in our society. How do you think we can extend this conversation beyond just avoiding the N-word to promoting more inclusive language in general?
That's an excellent question. I think it starts with education and self-reflection. We need to be willing to examine our own biases and the language we use. Are we using terms that might be offensive to certain groups without realizing it? Are we perpetuating stereotypes through our choice of words? It's about developing a more nuanced understanding of language and its impact.
Those are really important points. It reminds me of how language around gender and sexuality has evolved in recent years. Terms that were once commonplace are now recognized as harmful or exclusionary.
Absolutely, and that evolution of language is a perfect example of how society can change for the better. It shows that we're capable of learning, growing, and becoming more inclusive. But it also highlights the importance of being open to change and willing to listen when someone tells us that our language is hurtful.
So true. And it's not always easy, is it? Sometimes people can feel defensive when they're told that a word they've been using is problematic.
You're right, it can be challenging. I think that's where empathy comes in. Instead of getting defensive, we need to try to understand why the word is hurtful. Put ourselves in the other person's shoes. Ask ourselves, how would I feel if someone used a term that demeaned my identity or heritage?
That's a powerful exercise. It really brings home the impact of our words. Now, as we wrap up, what final thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I'd say this. Words have power. Use that power wisely and kindly. Whether you're Muslim or not, choosing to avoid harmful language like the N-word is a step towards creating a more respectful and inclusive world for everyone. Remember, change starts with each one of us. Every time we choose respect over disrespect, kindness over cruelty, we're making the world a little bit better.
Those are powerful words to end on. Thank you for this insightful discussion. It's given us all a lot to think about and hopefully will inspire some positive changes in how we communicate with one another.